Hey, have you ever stood in front of a speaker aisle, looking at a handful of high-end drivers, and thought, do I really need to drop this much cash for sound that I'll only notice when I'm really paying attention? I've been there more than once, and before I clicked add to cart on the Focal 3KRX3, I spent a solid afternoon reading forums, listening to a few friends' setups, and trying to picture exactly how these mids would sit in my own room. If you're wrestling with the same hesitation wondering whether these 3-inch, 50W RMS K2 rated mids are the right fit for your system before you spend any money, this rundown is for you. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the situation where these speakers actually shine. Imagine you've already built a solid foundation with a pair of solid-backed floor-standing woofers, or maybe you have a compact bookshelf pair that handles the lows and highs decently, but your mid-range feels thin, especially when a vocal line or a saxophone solo creeps into the mix. The 3KRX3 is designed to fill that exact gap. They're meant to be integrated into a two-way or three-way cabinet, acting as the connective tissue that brings the bass and treble together without sounding brittle. In practice, that means you'll hear a smoother transition between the thump of a kick drum and the shimmer of a cymbal, and voices will sit more naturally in the soundstage. Who should consider grabbing these? If you're already a bit serious about hi-fi, say, you own a decent amp that can comfortably drive 8 ohms and you've got the room space for a dedicated mid cabinet, then the 3KRX3 can be a real value. Their 50W RMS handling is generous for a mid-range driver, so they can be paired with both modestly powered amps and more robust ones without fear of clipping. They're particularly appealing to people who enjoy genre-heavy music like vocal-centric pop, acoustic folk, or jazz, where the mid-range is the storytelling core. Also, if you're setting up a home theater system and need clear dialogue reproduction, these drivers can help your center channel sound less nasal and more grounded. On the flip side, if you're just starting out, on a tight budget, or you already have a full-range system that you love, you might want to skip them. The 3KRX3 isn't a standalone solution. They need a proper enclosure and a complementary woofer and tweeter to truly express their potential. Trying to shoehorn them into a DIY cabinet without proper internal damping can lead to unwanted resonances that mask the benefit they bring. In short, they're an upgrade component, not a starter kit. Now, let's drill into the practical strengths. The first thing you'll notice, after they're correctly mounted and the crossover is set up according to the manufacturer's guidelines, is the clarity of mids. A singer's voice will cut through the mix without sounding harsh, and you'll pick up subtle nuances in a piano's lower register that can get lost on more generic drivers. In a home theater scenario, the dialogue in a blockbuster scene becomes less muddy, making subtitles almost unnecessary. Another tangible advantage is how well they handle dynamics. Because the K2 rating gives them a solid headroom, you won't hear distortion even when the music ramps up to a crescendo, something I tested with a live recording of a brass band, and the brass maintained its punch without any audible compression. There are a couple of hidden trade-offs you should be aware of. The 3KRX3's cone is relatively lightweight, which is great for fast transient response, but it also means the driver can be more susceptible to overdriving if you push your amp too hard. I ran a quick volume sweep with a 100-watt amp, and at full blast the mids started to sound a touch tight, a kind of edge that's noticeable on aggressive rock tracks. It's not a deal-breaker, but it does suggest you should pair them with an amp that has decent gain control or consider a soft start approach. Also, because they're 3 inches, they're physically smaller than many competitors' 4-inch mids. In larger rooms, you might need to position them carefully, ideally at ear level, to avoid a dip in the sweet spot. That is a bit more positioning work than you'd do with a larger driver that can fill the space more forgivingly. One practical weakness that shows up when you're trying to integrate these into an existing cabinet is the need for a well-matched crossover. The 3KRX3 is often sold as part of a kit that includes a dedicated crossover for Focal's own woofers and tweeters, but if you're mixing brands, you'll need to calculate the crossover points yourself. I ran a test where I paired them with a different brand's tweeter, and the result was a small hole around 2 kHz, exactly where the mid and high intersect. That gap manifested as a faint hollowness in vocal recordings. So unless you're comfortable fine-tuning crossover frequencies, you might want to stick with the full set that Focal recommends.